Hello and welcome to another episode of Labbing It. Today we're going to extend our environment to create a secondary site or a disaster recovery site. If you've been following along with the videos, we already have an existing site set up, which is our Melbourne site. Today we're going to create a secondary site in Sydney. Now this is all just fictional, it's all within my lab environment, but I'm going to split it up into two sites. So what we're going to need to do is create an additional router that's going to be based in our Sydney network, and then we're going to use the power of an IPSec VPN to connect those two sites up so that the Melbourne and Sydney sites can communicate freely. So let's get into it right now. So if we have a look at our network, um, basically, if you've been following along with the videos, this will kind of make a little bit of sense to you. If you haven't, this is just a bit of an overview of what my network looks like. On the left-hand side, we have the Ubiquiti Dream Machine, and pretty much that's the lifeline of this environment. So that's splitting up the two networks between my home network that myself and my family use, and my lab network. And basically in the middle, we've got my lab PC, which has got two network attachments, one for the home network, which is what I use to gain access via RDP to this actual lab machine. And then it's got a secondary NIC, which is my lab network, which goes out to our Dream machine over a different subnet and subsequently out to the internet. So that's how I give my lab environment some internet access. And what you can see inside is the VMware workstation setup, which is what we're using, the software tool that we're using for this lab. And you can see we've got a Melbourne network, a subnet 192.168.10.0/24. Now that's all been configured. It's got its own little pfSense box that has one NIC for inside that 10.0 network and another NIC which is out on the lab network. It's the gateway box, the router, if you like, that allows my Melbourne network to get access out through to the internet via that 172.16.30.6 interface. And inside the Melbourne network, we've already established a little environment. We've got a couple of domain controllers. We've got an ESXi environment with vCenter running. I think we've got an Exchange server as well. And all we're going to do now is create that secondary site below, which is the Sydney site 192.168.20.0, which means we're going to build another pfSense router that will have an outbound NIC on the 16.30 network with a .8 IP address, and that's going to allow us to create that site-to-site VPN between the two WAN interfaces of the pfSense routers. And then basically we should be able to freely communicate between the two sites. So let's jump into the lab now, and we'll first actually what we're first going to do, just going back with our tasks, we're going to update our pfSense box in Melbourne to the latest version. So let's do that first. Okay, so we are on a Windows PC in the Melbourne network, so Mel PC 1, and we're going to connect to our existing router, which is on an IP address of 192.168.10.1, and we're going to just quickly log in here. This is pretty straightforward. It actually takes a little bit of time, so we're not going to actually go through and watch the whole process, but I'm just going to kick it off. There's a under system in update. It should give us the latest stable version. So it's just doing a little retrieval. So it's just checking the pfSense website. So I'm currently running 2.6. I'm going to install 2.7. And then when we go ahead and install the Sydney pfSense box, we'll make that 2.7 as well. So I've already pre-downloaded that onto this machine. So I'm going to hit the confirm button here. This process actually can take probably about 10 or 15 minutes. Excuse my Windows 7 machine. I'm going to upgrade these very soon because I'm getting more and more issues with compatibility. As you would expect, Windows 7 is a long-gone operating system. But if you've been following along the videos, you'll quite understand why we started with Windows 7. We've even got a domain controller, which is a 2008 R2 box. So these are all going to be upgraded in due course. So I'm just going to let that go. I'm going to pause the video actually because this will take a while. I'm not going to bore anybody. You shouldn't have to do anything. This will just automatically install and upgrade and do any rebooting if required. So I'll just pause the video and we'll come back once it's complete. Okay, so that looks like it's completed. Let's quickly log in. So it did do a reboot on its own. Excellent, and somewhere here 2.7.0 release. So we are up to date, which is good. So now we can progress on. So the next thing we want to do now is actually create the Sydney router. So let's have a quick look at the Melbourne router and just check the settings that we have here for this virtual machine. It's got two network adapters. One is on this custom VMnet 2 bridged network. This is the 172.30 I think it's, sorry, 172.16.30.6 network. Let's just go back to the diagram here. So at the top there, in the pfSense box there for Melbourne, you can see the 172.16.30.6. That's what the VMnet 2 network is. So when we create our new Sydney router, we're going to put one NIC on this very same network, the VMnet 2 bridge network, and we're going to give it an IP address of 30.8. And the other is in this LAN segment called Labbing at Melbourne. And this pretty much is where all of our other machines that we are running are living in. So all the machines relating to the Melbourne environment are in this LAN segment. So I just click cancel and have a look at this PC that we're using. For instance, it is on a LAN segment, which is the Labbing at Melbourne LAN segment. So it lives in its own little network, segregated from anything else in my lab environment. And the only way that it can talk out is through the gateway of this Melbourne router. So let's create a new router. So we do this through VMware Workstation, File New Virtual Machine. We'll just say typical, and I'll browse to where my ISOs are. So you just download the pfSense box from the pfSense ISO just from the pfSense website. You just do a quick Google search and that will yield the result that you're looking for. I'm just going to install the 2.7.0. There is an actual more recent release, 2.7.2, but I just want to keep things exactly how it is in Melbourne. So 2.7.0 and go open. And it detects that this is a FreeBSD version 10 and earlier 64-bit detected ISO. So it's going to kind of give me some automatic preferences on how it's going to configure this virtual machine. I'm going to call it SID route. So we've got Mel route up the top here. So we're going to call this SID route. And it's going to just install this virtual machine to this location on my lab server. Next. It already exists. That's okay because I've got a different type of lab, but I do call it exactly the same thing. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move that and put it on a different drive letter. So we'll call it F. Actually, I know why that did that. Let me go back. Let's go back into E. I've got another lab called Big Lab. I call it for some reason. I need to actually put this in labbing it. So put it in here, and now we'll call it SID route. That will fix that issue. It's just in a different folder. Happy with the 20 gig maximum disk size. I'll store this virtual disk as a single disk, so just one 20 gig disk. It's all thin provisioned, so don't anticipate in your own network that you're going to use the full 20 gig for this disk. It's only going to use what it needs, which is a fraction of the 20 gig. Next, I'm just going to customize. I'm not going to change anything here. 256 megabytes of RAM is enough for this router. Don't need to change the processors, but what I will change is the network adapters. So it comes pre-installed with one network adapter. This needs to be the VMnet 2, the bridge network, and then we're going to add a new network adapter. Now, this one's going to be slightly different because the Melbourne router currently lives in a LAN segment called labbingit/Melbourne. This one is going to be labbingit/Sydney. To add a LAN segment, you can just click on LAN segments here and go add. I've already got it pre-created, so labbingit Sydney, and go close, and I'm happy to power this virtual machine and go finish. And I'm going to see the Sydney router boot up. Installing this is pretty quick. It's pretty much accept all the defaults. I think there might be one thing you have to do. It's just from memory. I only install these once every now and then. Just going to get rid of that message down the bottom. Okay, accept. So it's defaulted to install, so I'm okay with that. Auto ZFS, I'm okay with that. And proceed with the installation. I'm happy with a stripe. I'm not worrying about disk redundancy. And it sees that there is a disk called DA0. I'm happy for pfSense to be installed on this disk. So I use the spacebar to highlight that box, and I'm just using the enter button to click through everything else. So okay. And last chance, you're going to destroy the current contents of the following disks. DA0, yes, it's a brand new disk, and let it do its thing. Now this doesn't really take long at all. Done. And do a reboot. Now, what I'm going to do next is, once this is rebooted, I'm just going to configure the two NICs with the IP addresses that I require. So just to reiterate, we're in the Sydney network. Down there, you can see the pfSense box in the Sydney network. It's got a WAN IP address 172.16.30.8 and a network or a LAN network IP address of 192.168.20.1. That's going to be the gateway IP address for all other workloads that run inside this subnet. And probably something that I haven't got here, I was just having a quick look. There's a so this is obviously 30.8 will be the gateway for this lab network. We also need to nominate what we call an upstream gateway, which is the 172.16.30.1 IP address, which actually lives in my dream machine. So essentially telling the 30.8 address that the way to get to the internet is through my dream machine, which is the IP of 30.1. So we actually put those details into our router. So let's go back and see where we're at. So it's just configuring the interfaces. I might just pause the video in case this takes a few too many seconds, and I'll come back once the auto setup is complete. Okay, it is complete. Now it's configured some IP addresses there, but I'm not quite happy with those, so I'm just going to change the details there. So the option I'm looking for is to set the interfaces, which is option 2. And then it's going to ask me which interface do I want to set up. I'll start with the WAN, so option 1. Do I want DHCP? No, I do not. And now it's just asking for the IP address, which is 172.16.30.8, and subnet mask is 24. Now here it's just asking for the upstream gateway address, which I mentioned before, so that's 172.16.30.1. And that will allow internet access for anybody using this as the gateway. And should this gateway be set as default, that's fine. Do I want to use DHCP 6? No. And I don't want any IPv6 addresses, so I'll just hit enter for none. Do you want to enable DHCP server on this WAN? No. And do you want to revert to HTTP as the web configurator protocol? No, we Don't need to do anything there. Okay, that address is complete. Now we just need to do the LAN network. So option 2 again. This time we'll choose option 2 for LAN. No DHCP. And this IP address is 192.168.20.1. And that's going to be the default gateway IP address for all the workloads running in this network. It's a 24-bit subnet. Don't need anything here. I just hit enter. I don't want DHCP6 and I don't want an IPv6 address, so enter for none. And no DHCP server on the LAN, so no. And no. Done. Now, the issue I've got right now is if I go back into my PC, now my PC is in the Melbourne network and I want to manage the Sydney router. If I try to ping that IP address, I'm not going to be able to do anything right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to configure a PC for the Sydney network as well. So I can temporarily set that up with a static IP in the .20 subnet and configure the Sydney router through the web interface on that side. So what I'm quickly going to do, I'm not going to actually show really too much here of this process because it's not really part of the video, but I'm going to use my Windows 10 template that I've pre-created a while back, and I am going to clone it because it's all ready to go. It's been updated. I'm going to go next, yes, and create a full clone. I'm just going to call this SID DC1, sorry, SID PC1. I'm just going to copy that because I'm going to change that address so I don't make that same mistake as before. It's going to go in the labbing it folder and copied in as such. Okay, that's just going to go away and clone that machine, so it's going to be ready to go. I'm just going to pause the video here because this is not really that important. I'll be back in a sec. Okay, that's done. Just so you know what I'm going to do with this machine, I'm going to close that template and I'm going to edit the virtual machine and I'm going to just change the network. So by default, it's trying to bridge only the connection. I actually want to put it in the Sydney LAN segment and go OK. And now I'm going to boot this up. Now this is going to go through I think through all the sysprep stuff. I've actually got a previous video of how to do all this. I'll put a link in the description below. I'll say no to that. If you want to actually work out how to build a Windows 10 template in VMware Workstation so that you can reuse over and over for different purposes, it's quite a useful tool to create a template so that you don't have to keep recreating Windows boxes over and over. So this is going to boot up. I might just pause it. I'll get this machine up and running with an IP address, and then we'll go ahead and configure our pfSense box. Okay, the PC up and running. So I'm just going to quickly configure the network settings. Numlock. So I'm just going to give this an IP address of 20. Let's say 160. Subnet mask is right, and the gateway would be 20.1. And the DNS servers, now I've got two of them, but they're in the Melbourne site, so that's okay. I'm going to put them in there, even though we can't really talk to them just yet. And just so that we can prove that we can talk to the gateway, I'm just going to go 20.1, which is great. And it should have internet access. Let's have a look. Just not DNS. I'm pretty sure if I try to do like that, it's going to probably fail. Unless the pfSense box can do something smart on the way out. Yeah, no, that's okay. All right, I'm going to keep that up there for the time being. And actually now what I want to do is, I don't like using Edge too much in my labs. just prefer to use Chrome. So I'm going to see if I can get, no, I'm not going to be able to do that. All right, bear with me. I'm going to get Chrome installed onto this box, and then we'll go ahead and configure. One moment. Okay. I just grabbed an offline installer and just copied it onto this desktop. So as long as you've got VMware tools installed on your virtual machine, you can copy executable files from, say, any computer in your lab and then just paste them into your VM. So that's all I've done there. Just grab the offline installer and installed. Now, let's get into 20.1 and proceed. Now, the default username and password is admin and pfSense, or lowercase. And now it's just going to ask me to go through some quick configuration because this is the first time I'm logging in, and I'll be happy to oblige. I'm actually going to call this host name, I'm going to call it SID route, and it's on our JT Airlines internal domain. The primary DNS server is 10.10 and 10.14. Let me just do that again, 10.14. I'll probably change this at a little later stage because in our Sydney site I will put its own domain controller at some point, but I'm just going to leave it like that for now. Go next. I use my ISP's NTP server, so ntp.int.on.net, and I will look for Australia Sydney. I'm pretty sure I configured the other router with Australia Melbourne. Melbourne and Sydney, they're both in the same time zone anyway, so that's not too much of an issue. Don't need to do anything here except just turn these two off. These will cause some firewall issues if we leave those on. So I'll just turn them off. The LAN IP address is already configured, so I'll leave it as that, 20.1. And we'll change the default password. And next, and reload. Done. And finish. Beautiful. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to configure a firewall rule on the WAN. And this is pretty much just to say pass WAN IPv4 TCP, and I want it to be the source. Sorry, I needed a single host. Let's have a look. So anything from the 172.16.30.6 WAN IP address, which is over in Melbourne, and the destination is the 172.16.30.8 IP address, which is here in Sydney. We're going to allow, so I'm just going to hit save and apply. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to jump over into the Melbourne network, and I'm already logged in here. I'm just going to go to firewall rules also on the WAN, and I'm going to do the same thing, but just reverse it. So the source is 172.16.30.8, and the destination, single host, 172.16.30.6, and save. Apply changes. Okay. So that's kind of a little bit configured. So let's start with the IPSec tunnel creation. So I don't think I've missed anything that we need to do here. So the Sydney site's ready to go. Okay, so let's just do the IPSec VPN. So we'll start configuring this on the Melbourne side. So we have to configure both routers. So I'm just going to come and jump over to Melbourne, and I'm going to go to VPN IPSec, and essentially on the tunnels tab, sorry, I'm just having some computer issues here. 1 second. Okay. Now we are going to go add P1. So there are there's two sets of configurations to create this IPSec tunnel. Now I'm no network engineer, so I'm probably not the best person to explain exactly everything that's going on under the hood here. I've just followed an article from the pfSense website to create this, and it just worked straight up. This may not also be the best way to create an IPSec VPN because I am going to be using pre-shared keys. I'm not going to be using certificates or anything like that, which I guess is the typical recommendation these days. I just want to make it nice and easy so that I can set up my secondary site. So here we are on the Melbourne router, tunnel add P1. Description, so I'm just going to call it VPN to Sydney. Not going to make a lot of changes here. Everything is almost configured exactly how I want it. IPv2, IPv4, we're going to use the WAN interface. It's just asking for the remote gateway, so that is 172.16.30.8. Mutual PSK, identifiers and peer identifiers we don't need to change. We do need a pre-shared key, so I'm just going to get it to generate one. We're going to need to copy this and put this over in our Sydney configuration, but I'll just leave it for now. The only thing I will change here is the encryption algorithm, 256 bits using SHA-256, and that can stay as default. What else we got down here? Don't think I need to change anything here. That's all. Yep, that's all good. Okay, just what I might change here is the child SA close action. I'm just going to change this to restart reconnect. Not going to change anything here. Here, 10 and 5. No, that's fine. I'm happy with those settings. That's how I've configured it previously. So I'm going to go save. And then I'm going to create a phase 2 entry. So let's do that now. Phase 2 entry. And I need to, there we go, edit. So this is the phase 2, so I'm just going to call this access to the 192.168.20.0.24 network in Sydney. I'm going to uncheck that. I don't want it disabled. It's a tunnel IPv4 LAN subnet, none network. That's fine. Just here that we just make a couple of little changes. We're going to uncheck this one. We're going to go with AES 256 with 128 bits. And down the bottom here, I don't think we're going to need to change anything else here. No, that's pretty much all good, so I'll click save. Okay, I'm just going to apply those changes. So now we've got these two phases in Melbourne configured. We're going to jump over to our Sydney router and configure the same over here. So under VPN, IPSec, add phase 1. And we'll call this VPN to Melbourne, and pretty much just reversing the configuration. So the gateway is 172.16.30.6. I don't think we need to do anything here. So we do need that pre-shared key. So I'm just going to see if I can get the power of copy and paste by going back to my Melbourne PC, just going in here and edit, and I'm just going to highlight this key and see if I can do a copy and paste. I hope I can. Beautiful. Copy and paste works. And I'll just scroll a bit down. So I think we changed that to 256 and that's all okay. Now, this is just per the documentation. This should be a little bit higher the lifetime should be a little bit higher on the Sydney router as opposed to the Melbourne router. So I'm just going to change that to this option. I think it's like 110%, which is fine. That should be all okay. Actually, then this should be 28512, and this should be, I think it automatically adds 10% anyways, but just putting that in there. And the only difference here is the child SA start action go none. So this route is the actual responded to the VPN request for configuration, and the close action will be close connection and clear SA. And I don't think there's anything else we have to do here. No, that looks all pretty normal. So I'll click save, and we'll add the P2. Add P2. There we go. Okay. Access to the 192.168.10.0/24 network in Melbourne. IPv4, LAN subnet, none, network. Protocol is fine, but we just change these two options to this option with 128 bits. Again, I think we just changed the life. Pretty sure I don't need to change these ones. These will automatically update. 540. And that's about it. So that was pretty straightforward. And save. Valid remote network IP address needs to be provided. Oh, I did not do that. Oh, did I do this in the other setup? 168. So this should be 192.168.10.0. Let's go save. I'm going to check the Melbourne one in a second, just to make sure that we've got all that set up properly. Let's go to we do have it in there. 192.168.20.0. Okay, that's all configured. Let's just go and check the status and see if it's automatically made a connection. Let's go connect. There is one more thing we need to do. Oh, it does say established, but I'll just disconnect for now. So just in our firewall rules, we do need to update those a little bit. Let's have a look. So now we see this new tab for IPSec. So we are currently in the Melbourne. What we're going to do, I think we'll just edit this rule, this default rule. This is kind of allowing everything. What we want to do is just lock it down ever so slightly to source network being the 192.168. So if we're in the Melbourne, so the source will be 20.0, 24, and the destination is 192.168.10.0, 24, and save. The following errors. Okay, let's change that to IPv4 only. Save and apply. And we'll just do the same thing, but in reverse over in Sydney. Firewall, rules, IPSec, add. And network for the source is going to be 192.168.10.0, 24. And destination 192.168.20.0/24. Done. Apply. Let's go back to Melbourne. Let's go back to IPSec and let's go to status IPSec and do a connection of P1 and P2. And now we are established. So we're on this Melbourne PC. Let's see if we can ping the the Sydney gateway. 192.168.20.1. Beautiful. And just to verify, let's just keep that running and see what happens if we do disconnect the VPN. Disconnect. See if we do get a, yep, oh, hang on, did I disconnect that properly? Just make this window a little smaller. I've got a feeling what it might have happened is that, oh no, that's it, that's better. Let's see what happens here, okay. It looks like it just keeps reconnecting itself, but we can see that there is a disconnect. So we are now getting over that network. So if we go back to our network diagram, we are now successfully through a VM in the Melbourne subnet, traversing out the pfSense box over the Site VPN and down into the Sydney network. And so that's exactly what we're trying to establish here. Let's just try backwards as well. And this is actually going to be a better test because we've got other resources in the Melbourne network. So let's try the gateway. Let's just try the DNS server, which is 10.10. So that replies. Now technically we couldn't get internet before through DNS, so now we probably can. So if I was just to go to Google, no problem. What's another website? Let's just go to microsoft.com, and we are getting there as well. So that's using the DNS servers in the Melbourne site without any problems. So that's pretty much our site-to-site VPN fully configured. So I think we've pretty much completed all those tasks. So I hope this has been helpful. We are now going to build on top of this in this lab now. We're going to build a DR environment. So we'll end up building some more VMware servers, and we're going to use, we're going to extend our use of the Veeam server in the Melbourne site to set up a sort of a disaster recovery situation for Sydney. So that's going to be something fun to look forward to. So hopefully my videos. Happy for you guys that that you joined me for this one. I should have some more videos coming out in the very near future. Thank you.